My wife texted, "Stuck at the office, boring meeting." But I was 2 tables away, watching her kiss her boss. I didn't make a scene, I just replied, "Hope it's productive," and attached a photo of his hand on her leg. The sound of her scream filled the room. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my marriage of 37 years would end with a photograph taken from table 14 at Giuseppe's Italian restaurant. But there I was, 61 years old, watching my wife Shannon kiss another man while she thought I was 300 miles away in Chicago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had come to Giuseppe's to surprise her. Our anniversary was next week and I wanted to plan something special. Shannon had texted me that afternoon saying she was stuck in another boring meeting with her consulting clients. She did that a lot lately, these mysterious business meetings that seemed to stretch longer and longer each month. The restaurant was dimly lit, all mahogany booths and flickering candles. The kind of place where conversations were hushed and secrets felt safe. I had asked for a corner table, planning to watch for Shannon's arrival and surprise her when she walked in. Instead, I watched her slide into a booth with a man I had never seen before. He was tall, maybe 50-something, with silver hair and an expensive suit. The kind of man who commanded attention without trying. But what caught me off guard wasn't his appearance. It was how comfortable they looked together. How familiar. Shannon laughed at something he said, throwing her head back in that way she used to laugh with me. Then she leaned forward and he reached across the table to touch her face. Not like a business partner, not like a friend, like a lover. My phone was in my hand before I realized I had reached for it. The camera function opened with a soft click. Through the lens, I watched my wife of 37 years kiss a stranger. The flash was off, but the image was crystal clear, his hand on her leg under the table, her wedding ring nowhere to be seen. I took 3 pictures. Then I opened our text thread and typed a simple message. Hope your meeting is productive. I attached the clearest photo and hit send. The reaction was instant. Shannon's phone lit up on the table between them. She glanced at it, then froze. Her face went white as she stared at the screen. The man asked her something, but she wasn't listening. She was scanning the restaurant, her eyes wide with panic. I raised my wine glass in a small salute when her gaze found mine. Then I placed $30 on my table, gathered my coat, and walked out. The drive home took 23 minutes. 23 minutes of my mind racing between fury and something else, something colder. Because as I replayed the scene in my head, I realized this wasn't the first time Shannon had lied about her whereabouts. The late nights, the weekend trips, the sudden interest in business consulting that had started 3 years ago. How long had this been going on? Our house on Maple Street looked the same as always. 2-story colonial, perfectly maintained lawn, neighbors who waved when they saw me. The kind of life that looked successful from the outside. But as I pulled into our driveway, I wondered how much of it had been an illusion. I was sitting in the living room when Shannon burst through the front door 45 minutes later. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly disheveled. She clutched her purse against her chest like armor. "Ronald," her voice was breathless, "we need to talk." I took a sip of my bourbon and gestured to the chair across from me. "I'm listening." She sat down carefully, smoothing her skirt. Even caught red-handed, she was trying to maintain control. "That photo, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" I kept my voice steady. "What does it look like to you?" "Marcus is a business partner. We were celebrating closing a deal and he got excited and—" "Marcus," I interrupted her. "Is that his name?" Shannon blinked. She hadn't meant to tell me that. "How long, Shannon? How long what? How long have you been lying to me?" Her composure cracked slightly. "I haven't been lying. I've been working, building something for our future." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out our joint checkbook. I had grabbed it from my home office before she arrived. "Is this part of building our future?" Her eyes focused on the checkbook, and for the first time she looked genuinely afraid. "I found some interesting entries in here," I continued, flipping through the pages. "Checks made out to LMW Consulting, always signed by you, never discussed with me." I looked up at her. What's LMW Consulting, Shannon? She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. $23,000 in the past 6 months, I said. All to the same company, all signed with your name, but I held up one of the checks. This signature doesn't match the others. Shannon's face had gone pale again. Ronald, you don't understand. Help me understand. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. When she turned back, her expression had hardened. You've never supported my dreams, never believed I could build something on my own. So you forged my signature. I protected us, I protected our future, by stealing from our joint account. It's not stealing, her voice rose. I'm your wife. I have every right to use that money for investments that benefit both of us. I stood up slowly, setting the checkbook on the coffee table between us. Shannon, I've been married to you for 37 years. I know when you're lying. She stared at me for a long moment. Then something in her expression shifted. The mask of the loving wife slipped away, replaced by something calculating. Fine, she said. You want the truth? I've been building a business. A real business, not just sitting around waiting for retirement like you. She gestured around our living room. This isn't enough for me anymore, Ronald. It hasn't been enough for a long time. And Marcus? Marcus understands ambition. He understands what it means to want more than a comfortable middle-class existence. The words hit me like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they revealed how little my wife actually knew me. I had built a successful accounting practice from nothing. I had provided for our family for decades. But somewhere along the way, Shannon had decided that wasn't enough. Where's your wedding ring? I asked. She looked down at her bare finger, then back at me. I took it off for the meeting. Sometimes it's better if clients don't know you're married. Another lie. I could see it in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. I walked to the mantel where our family photos were displayed. 37 years of birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, our children Michael and Sarah smiling from various stages of their lives. But as I looked at the most recent photos, I realized Shannon's smile had changed. When had it become so forced? I have a question, I said, turning back to her. She was watching me carefully now, like she wasn't sure what I might do next. The consulting business you've been building, the one that requires so many evening meetings and weekend trips, the one that's so important you had to forge my signature to fund it. I paused. Does it actually exist? Shannon's silence was answer enough. I nodded slowly, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. How many people know about Marcus? What do you mean? Have you told the children about him? Your sister, your mother? There's nothing to tell them. So I'm the only one who doesn't know about your business partner, the only one who doesn't know about your new ambitions. I walked back to my chair and sat down. That seems like an interesting choice for a wife to make. Shannon wrapped her arms around herself. For the first time since she had walked in, she looked vulnerable. You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like your life is just maintenance. Is that what our marriage has been to you? Maintenance? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The answer was written across her face. I picked up my bourbon and took another sip. The liquid burned, but it was nothing compared to the fire building in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something more focused than that. I think you should know something, I said. Shannon looked at me expectantly. I didn't just happen to be at Giuseppe's tonight. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean, I've known about your evening meetings for months. I've known about the weekend trips that don't match up with your stories. I've known about the second cell phone you think you've hidden so well in your purse. Shannon's hand moved instinctively to her purse, confirming what I already suspected. Tonight wasn't an accident, I continued. Tonight was me finally getting proof. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Shannon stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. What are you saying? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly maintained neighborhood. I'm saying that for the first time in our marriage, I know exactly who you are." When I turned back, Shannon was crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of someone whose carefully constructed world was falling apart. "Ronald, please, let me explain." But I was done with explanations, done with lies disguised as truths, done with being the fool in my own marriage. "Get some sleep, Shannon. We'll finish this conversation tomorrow." She opened her mouth to protest, but something in my expression stopped her. She gathered her purse and walked toward the stairs, pausing at the bottom step. "This doesn't have to destroy everything," she said softly. I met her eyes. "You already did that." After she disappeared upstairs, I remained in the living room for another hour, holding the checkbook and thinking about signatures, about trust, about the difference between the woman I thought I had married and the stranger who had just walked up to our bedroom. Tomorrow, I would start making phone calls. Tomorrow, I would begin to understand exactly how deep this deception went. But tonight, I simply sat in the ruins of my marriage and tried to remember the last time Shannon had looked at me the way she had looked at Marcus across that restaurant table. I couldn't remember. And that, perhaps, was the most devastating revelation of all. The next morning, Shannon was gone before I woke up. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "Went to my sister's to think. We'll talk tonight. S." No explanation, no apology. Just another lie because I knew she wasn't at her sister's house. Karen lived in Portland, a 6-hour drive away. Shannon's car was in the driveway 30 minutes after I found the note, then gone again. She was buying time, probably meeting with Marcus to figure out damage control. I made coffee and sat at our kitchen table, staring at the granite countertops Shannon had insisted we install 2 years ago. $23,000 for a kitchen renovation. At the time, she said it would increase our home's value. Now I wondered if that money had actually gone to her secret consulting business. I opened my laptop and began what would become the longest day of my 61 years. The checkbook was just the beginning. I logged into our online banking and started going through 6 months of statements, line by line. What I found made my stomach turn. LMW Consulting wasn't the only company receiving our money. There was also Summit Financial Services, Meridian Business Solutions, and Empire Holdings, LLC. 4 different companies, all receiving checks in amounts ranging from $3,000 to $8,000, all signed by Shannon. But here's what made me pause. The endorsement stamps on the back of the canceled checks. They all had the same bank routing number. I grabbed my phone and called First National, our bank for the past 15 years. Mr. Morrison, Tom Bradley, our account manager, sounded genuinely pleased to hear from me. "How can I help you today?" "Tom, I need to understand something about check endorsements. If multiple companies are depositing checks at the same bank, would that show up in any records?" "Well, we can certainly track patterns for fraud prevention. Are you concerned about something specific?" I explained about the companies without mentioning Shannon directly. Tom put me on hold for several minutes. "Mr. Morrison, this is interesting. Those 4 companies you mentioned, they're all registered to the same business address, downtown on 5th Street, professional building, Suite 207. 5th Street. That was 3 blocks from Giuseppe's restaurant. Can you tell me who the account holder is for these companies?" "I can't give you specific account information, but I can tell you that the primary signature on file for all 4 accounts belongs to Shannon Morrison." The phone felt heavy in my hand. "Tom, hypothetically, if someone were running multiple business entities from the same location with the same signature authority, what would that suggest to you?" "Hypothetically. It could be legitimate business expansion, or—" He paused. "It could be someone making their financial activities look more complicated than they actually are." After I hung up, I sat staring at the kitchen wall, where Shannon had hung a wooden sign that read, "Home is where the heart is." The irony was suffocating. I spent the next 2 hours digging deeper. Property records showed that the building on 5th Street was owned by Webb Properties, LLC. A quick internet search revealed that Marcus Webb was the managing partner of Webb Properties, so Shannon's business partner owned the building where her 4 companies were registered. companies that were apparently just different names for the same operation. But what operation? I found my answer in Shannon's home office. She had converted our guest bedroom into what she called her workspace about 3 years ago. I rarely went in there, respecting what she said was her private area for client calls and paperwork. Now I understood why she wanted privacy. The desk drawers were locked, but I found the key taped under the bottom drawer. Inside were business cards I had never seen before. Shannon Webb, Senior Partner, LMW Consulting. Not Shannon Morrison. Shannon Webb. Another card read, Shannon Webb, Investment Advisor, Summit Financial Services. I stared at the cards for a full minute. She wasn't just having an affair. She was living an entirely different life. The bottom drawer contained a file folder labeled Client Portfolio. Inside were investment statements showing accounts worth over $120,000. Money I had never seen in our joint financial planning. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was finding copies of our tax returns from the past 3 years, with my signature forged on forms I had never seen. Returns that showed business income I knew nothing about, deductions for expenses I had never approved. Shannon hadn't just been stealing from our joint account. She had been filing false tax returns in my name. I was still processing this when I found the travel receipts. Hotel bills from Denver, San Francisco, Nashville, all for weekend trips Shannon had told me were visiting her college friends. Except these receipts showed reservations for 2 people. Mr. and Mrs. Webb. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the receipts. 36 weekends over the past 2 years. Expensive hotels, fine dining, couples spa treatments, all paid for with money from our joint accounts. They weren't just business partners. They were living like a married couple. I heard Shannon's car in the driveway around 3 o'clock. I had just enough time to photograph everything and return the documents to exactly where I found them. When she walked into the kitchen, she looked like she had been crying. Or maybe she had just practiced looking like she had been crying. Ronald, I owe you an explanation. I was standing by the coffee maker, pouring my 4th cup of the day. I'm listening. Marcus and I have been developing an investment consulting firm. It's legitimate business, but it required startup capital. She sat down at the table, clasping her hands together. I should have discussed it with you, but I knew you'd worry about the risk. What kind of consulting? Financial planning for small businesses. Marcus has connections with companies that need help restructuring their investments. I nodded, sipping my coffee. That sounds promising. How many clients do you have? We're still building the client base. It takes time. I'm sure it does. I sat down across from her. What's LMW stand for? She blinked. What? LMW Consulting. The company you've been writing checks to. What do those letters represent? It's an acronym for our business model, Legacy Management and Wealth. I almost smiled. She was improvising now, making up answers as fast as I asked questions. And Summit Financial Services, Meridian Business Solutions, Empire Holdings, are those also part of your financial planning business? Shannon's face went pale. How do you know about those? I know a lot of things, Shannon, more than you think. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the sink. You've been spying on me. I've been trying to understand why my wife has been forging my signature on checks and tax returns. She spun around. Tax returns? The slip confirmed what I already knew. Shannon hadn't expected me to find those. 3 years of amended returns, I continued, filed electronically with my forged signature, claiming business deductions for a consulting firm I knew nothing about. I leaned back in my chair. The IRS tends to take a dim view of that kind of thing. Shannon's composure completely cracked. She grabbed the edge of the counter like she needed support. Ronald, you don't understand. Marcus knows people, important people who can make us wealthy beyond anything we've ever imagined. By committing tax fraud? By taking advantage of opportunities you're too conservative to see. There it was. The truth beneath all her lies. I wasn't an unwitting victim of her deception. I was an obstacle to her ambitions. Tell me about the hotels, I said. What hotels? The Marriott in Denver, the Ritz-Carlton in San Francisco, the Hermitage in Nashville. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I had taken. 36 weekends over 2 years, Shannon, all reserved for Mr. and Mrs. Webb. She stared at the phone screen, her breathing shallow. Those were business trips. Business trips where you shared a room with your partner? It was more cost-effective. Stop. My voice was sharper than I intended. Just stop lying. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Shannon wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller than I had seen her in years. How long have you been in love with him? I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Marcus makes me feel like the woman I was supposed to be. The honesty of it hit me harder than all the lies combined. And what woman is that? Someone important, someone whose ideas matter, someone who isn't just maintaining a life someone else built. I set my coffee cup down carefully. Is that how you see our marriage? Something I built that you're just maintaining? You never asked me what I wanted, she said, tears streaming down her face. You just assumed I'd be happy with your vision of our future. I asked you 1,000 times over the years what you wanted. You always said you were happy. Because I thought I was supposed to be happy. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But happiness isn't enough anymore, Ronald. I want to matter. I want to build something that's mine. So you built a lie. I built a business. With my money, using my name, filing false tax returns. I stood up, anger finally breaking through my careful control. That's not building something, Shannon. That's stealing. She flinched like I had slapped her. Everything we have, we built together. No, everything we had, we built together, past tense. I walked toward the doorway, then stopped. I want you to know something. She looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes. I love the woman I thought you were, I said. But that woman doesn't exist. She never existed, did she? Shannon's sob followed me as I left the kitchen and walked upstairs to our bedroom. I sat on the edge of our bed, looking around at the life we had shared for 37 years. Tomorrow I would call my lawyer. Tomorrow I would begin the process of protecting myself from the financial fraud my wife had committed in my name. But tonight I simply mourned the death of the marriage I thought I had and prepared for the war I was about to fight. Because if Shannon wanted to play games with false identities and secret businesses, she was about to learn that her husband of 37 years had a few surprises of his own. I called my lawyer at 7:30 the next morning, before Shannon woke up. David Chen had handled our wills and estate planning for 15 years, but I had never needed him for anything like this. Ronald, I have to ask, David said after I explained the situation. Are you absolutely certain about these allegations? Tax fraud and forgery are serious federal crimes. I have documentation, David. Photographs of forged signatures, bank statements, fake business registrations, all of it. How much money are we talking about? I had spent most of the night calculating. At least $120,000 diverted from our joint accounts over the past 3 years. That's not counting the tax implications of the fraudulent returns. David was quiet for a moment. Ronald, I need you to secure all of this evidence immediately. If Shannon realizes you've discovered everything, she might try to destroy documents or move money. What do you recommend? First, change the passwords on all your personal accounts. Second, document everything you can access while you still have access. Third, we need to discuss immediate legal protection for your assets. After I hung up, I spent 2 hours systematically photographing every document in Shannon's office and creating copies of all our financial records. By 9 o'clock, I had assembled a file that painted a devastating picture of systematic deception. Shannon came downstairs around 9:30 looking like she hadn't slept. She was wearing the blue robe I had bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, back when I thought our biggest problem was deciding where to go for vacation. "I made coffee," I said, not looking up from my laptop. She poured herself a cup and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Ronald, I want to fix this." "Fix what exactly?" "Our marriage. This misunderstanding about the business." I closed my laptop and looked at her directly. "Shannon, I need you to understand something. This stopped being a misunderstanding when I found the tax returns." Her face went pale. "What tax returns?" "The amended returns you filed electronically for 2021, 2022, and 2023, all claiming business deductions for consulting income that doesn't exist, all signed electronically with my forged signature." Shannon gripped her coffee cup so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Ronald, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, just like you explained the 4 fake businesses, just like you explained the hotel receipts for Mr. and Mrs. Webb." I leaned forward. "But here's what I need you to explain most of all. Did you really think I was stupid enough not to find out?" She flinched like I had struck her. "It's not about you being stupid." "Then what's it about?" "It's about survival." Her voice was fierce now, defensive. "It's about building something real instead of just coasting toward retirement." "Survival?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Shannon, we have $250,000 in our retirement accounts. We own our home. My practice generates $12,000 a month. What exactly are we surviving?" "Mediocrity." She slammed her cup down, coffee splashing onto the granite countertop. "Comfortable, middle-class mediocrity, where nothing ever changes and nothing ever matters." The mask was slipping again. The desperate housewife act was giving way to something harder, more calculating. "So you decided to steal from me." "I decided to invest in us." "By forging my signature on federal tax documents?" Shannon stood up abruptly and began pacing. "Marcus showed me opportunities you would never understand. Real estate investments, business partnerships, ways to turn our savings into serious wealth. Our savings that you accessed without my knowledge or consent. I'm your wife. I have every legal right to—" "You have every legal right to access our joint accounts," I interrupted. "You don't have the right to forge my signature. You don't have the right to file false tax returns in my name. You don't have the right to create fake businesses using our home address." Shannon stopped pacing. "How did you find out about the address?" "I found out about everything, Shannon. The question is, what were you planning to do when you got caught?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, calculating her next move. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, colder. "I wasn't planning to get caught." The honesty was startling. No more pretense, no more manipulation, just the truth. "What was the end game?" I asked. "Marcus and I were building something real, a consulting firm that could generate serious income. We needed startup capital and time to develop the client base." "And my role in this plan?" Shannon looked away. "Initially, you were supposed to benefit from the success without having to worry about the details." "Initially?" She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. I understood. "You were planning to leave me." Shannon wrapped her arms around herself. "Not immediately, not until the business was established and I could be financially independent." "Financially independent on money you stole from me. Money I invested for both of us." "Stop lying." My voice echoed through the kitchen, surprising both of us. I had never raised my voice at Shannon in 37 years of marriage. "Stop pretending this was about us. This was about you and Marcus building a life together while using me as a bank account." Shannon's composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of someone whose carefully planned scheme was falling apart. "You want to know the truth?" she sobbed. "Fine. Marcus understands me in ways you never have. He sees my potential instead of just seeing a wife who should be grateful for a comfortable life." "And what potential is that?" "The potential to be someone important. Someone who matters in the world instead of just existing in it. I stared at her, this woman I had shared a bed with for 37 years, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Not just because of the lies, but because of the fundamental selfishness that had driven every decision she had made. "Did you ever love me?" I asked. The question seemed to surprise her. "Of course I loved you. I still love you." "No, Shannon. You loved what I provided, the house, the security, the respectability. But did you ever actually love me?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "I thought I did," she finally whispered. The words hit me like a physical blow, but not because they were cruel, because they were honest. For the first time in our conversation, Shannon was telling me the complete truth. When did that change? I don't know. Gradually, I think. When the kids moved away and it was just us, I realized I didn't know who I was supposed to be anymore. I wasn't a mother, I wasn't building a career, I was just your wife. And that wasn't enough. It should have been. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I wanted it to be enough. But Marcus made me feel like I could be more. I nodded slowly, understanding finally clicking into place. "So you decided to become more by stealing from me and lying to federal tax authorities." "I decided to take control of my own life. By destroying mine." Shannon looked at me with something that might have been regret. That was never the intention. But it was always the inevitable result. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking our backyard. Shannon had planted flower beds along the fence line when we first moved in. Every spring she would spend weeks planning the layout, choosing colors that would complement each other. I had always admired her attention to detail, her ability to create beauty from nothing. Now I wondered if that had been another performance. "I have a question," I said without turning around. "Okay." "The money you've taken from our accounts, where is it now?" "It's invested in the business. Marcus has connections with—" "Where is it now, Shannon?" A long pause. "Some of it is in business accounts, some of it was used for operational expenses." I turned to face her. "How much is left?" "I don't know exactly. Marcus handles most of the financial management." "Guess." Shannon's hands twisted in her lap. "Maybe $30,000. You stole $120,000 from our joint accounts and you have $30,000 left to show for it." "It's not stolen, it's invested." "In what? Hotel rooms? Expensive dinners? Weekend trips to Nashville?" Shannon flinched with each accusation. "Those were business development expenses." "Business development?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Shannon, do you understand what you've done? Not just to our marriage, but legally?" "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I had taken of the tax documents. "You filed false returns with the IRS. You forged signatures on federal documents. You created fake businesses to hide money transfers." I met her eyes. "These aren't civil matters, Shannon. These are felonies." The blood drained from her face. "Ronald, you wouldn't—" "I wouldn't what? Report tax fraud to the authorities? Protect myself from someone who has been systematically stealing from me?" Shannon stood up so quickly her chair nearly tipped over. "If you turn me in, it will destroy both of us. They'll audit everything. They'll freeze our accounts. They'll investigate the fraud you committed. In my name and your name, don't you understand? I forged your signature, but they'll assume you knew about it. We're married. We file joint returns." For the first time since discovering Shannon's betrayal, I felt a chill of real fear. She was right about one thing. The IRS wouldn't necessarily distinguish between the victim and the perpetrator in a case like this. "That's why you used my signature," I said slowly. "Not just to access the accounts, but to make sure I couldn't report you without incriminating myself." Shannon's expression was almost pitying. "I protected both of us, Ronald. Whatever you think of Marcus and me, I made sure you couldn't be prosecuted for something you didn't know about. You made sure I couldn't escape the consequences of your crimes. I made sure we were in this together." The manipulation was breathtaking in its complexity. Shannon hadn't just stolen from me. She had engineered the theft to ensure my complicity whether I knew about it or not. "Except for one thing," I said. "What's that?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. "I've been recording our conversation." Shannon's eyes widened. "You can't use that. Spousal privilege doesn't apply to ongoing crimes." I set the recorder on the table between us, and it definitely doesn't apply when one spouse is defrauding the other. Shannon stared at the recorder like it was a bomb. "Ronald, please, we can work this out. We can fix the tax returns, return the money, start over." "With what money? You just told me there's only $30,000 left." "Marcus and I can liquidate some investments." "Marcus." I sat back down and studied my wife's face. "Tell me about Marcus, Shannon. Is he married?" She nodded reluctantly. "Does his wife know about your business partnership?" "That's complicated." "I'm sure it is. Does she know about the hotel rooms, the weekend trips, the fact that you've been using her husband's last name?" Shannon's silence told me everything I needed to know. "So Marcus is cheating on his wife with you while you steal money from me to fund your affair." I shook my head. "And you call this building something important? You don't understand what Marcus and I have." "You're right. I don't understand how two people can be so selfish that they destroy two marriages for a fantasy." Shannon stood up and walked toward the kitchen doorway. When she reached it, she turned back. "This doesn't have to end our marriage, Ronald. We can work through this." I looked at her standing there in her blue robe, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying. For a moment, I could almost see the woman I had fallen in love with 40 years ago. The woman who had promised to love, honor, and cherish me until death do us part. "Shannon," I said gently, "our marriage ended the moment you chose Marcus over me. Everything since then has just been clean-up." She left the kitchen without another word. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of our bedroom door closing. I sat alone at the table, staring at the recorder and thinking about the woman who had just walked away. Tomorrow I would meet with David Chen to discuss legal protection. Tomorrow I would begin the process of untangling 37 years of shared assets from someone who had been systematically defrauding me. But tonight I would simply sit in the ruins of my marriage and accept that sometimes the people we love most are capable of destroying us most completely. The call from my son Michael came at 6:15 the next morning. "Dad, what the hell's going on?" I was sitting in my home office, having spent the night on the couch downstairs. Shannon had locked herself in our bedroom, and I hadn't bothered trying to talk to her again. "Good morning to you too, Michael." "Mom called me crying at midnight. She says you're threatening to have her arrested." I rubbed my temples, feeling the weight of sleepless exhaustion. "What exactly did your mother tell you?" "She said you found out about her business partnership and you're acting like she committed some kind of crime." Michael's voice was sharp, defensive. "She said you've been spying on her and recording private conversations." "Did she mention the forged signatures, the fraudulent tax returns, the $120,000 she stole from our joint accounts?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Dad, you're scaring me. You sound paranoid." "Paranoid?" I almost laughed. "Michael, I need you to listen to me carefully. Your mother has been conducting an affair with a business partner named Marcus Webb. She's been using money from our joint accounts to fund fake businesses and file false tax returns. I have documentation of all of this." "Documentation? Dad, this sounds like you're having some kind of breakdown." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son was questioning my sanity, rather than considering that his mother might be lying to him. "Have you talked to your sister about this?" "Sarah's the one who told me to call you. Mom called her too, and Sarah's worried that you're—" He trailed off. "That I'm what?" "That you're not thinking clearly. Maybe the stress of retirement planning has been too much, and you're imagining things that aren't there." I closed my eyes, understanding Shannon's strategy. She hadn't just called our children to defend herself. She had planted the seed that their father was mentally unstable. "Michael, I want you to do something for me." "What?" I want you to call our accountant, Jim Patterson, ask him about the amended tax returns filed for the past 3 years, ask him if he prepared them. Dad, just do it, then call me back. I hung up before he could argue. Within 10 minutes, my phone was ringing again. Dad? Michael's voice was different now, uncertain. I called Jim. He says he never filed any amended returns for you. He says he wasn't even aware that any had been filed. And what does that tell you? A long pause. I don't know. Maybe Mom filed them herself. With whose signature, Michael? Another pause, longer this time. I need to think about this. After he hung up, I sat staring at the family photos on my desk. Michael at his college graduation, beaming as he received his computer science degree. Sarah at her wedding 3 years ago, radiant in her white dress. Shannon and I at our 25th anniversary party, smiling for the camera like we didn't have a care in the world. When had the smiles become performances? My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dad, we need to talk. Can you meet me for lunch? I agreed to meet her at Romano's, the Italian place where we used to go for her birthday dinners when she was a teenager. When I arrived, she was already seated in a corner booth, nervously stirring her iced tea. Sarah looked like a younger version of Shannon, but without the calculating hardness that had emerged in her mother's expression over the years. She stood and hugged me when I approached the table. Dad, I'm so confused, she said as we sat down. Mom says you're threatening her with legal action over some business misunderstanding, but Michael says there might be tax problems. What did your mother tell you exactly? Sarah glanced around the restaurant as if someone might be listening. She said you've been going through her personal papers and making accusations about her business partner. She says you're jealous because she's finally building something that's hers instead of just being your wife. And what do you think about that? I think... Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. I think Mom has seemed different lately. Happier, but also more secretive. She's been taking a lot of business trips, and when I ask her about them, she gives vague answers. When did this start? About 2 years ago, I think. She started talking about this consulting business she was developing, but she never wanted to discuss details. She said you wouldn't understand because you're too conservative about investments. I nodded, pieces of the timeline falling into place. Sarah, I need to tell you some things that are going to be difficult to hear. Over the next hour, I laid out everything I had discovered. The forged signatures, the fake businesses, the fraudulent tax returns, the affair with Marcus Webb. I showed her copies of the documentation, watching her face grow pale as she absorbed the magnitude of her mother's deception. This can't be true, she whispered when I finished. Mom wouldn't do this. She loves you. I thought so too. Sarah stared at the documents spread across the table between us. The tax returns... Dad, this could get both of you in serious trouble. I know. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Shannon's name appeared on the screen. Don't answer it, Sarah said quickly. I looked at my daughter, surprised by the urgency in her voice. She's been calling me all morning, Sarah explained. First to tell me you were acting strange, then to ask if I thought you might be having memory problems or stress-related mental issues. Memory problems? She said you've been accusing her of things that never happened, that you seem confused about conversations you've had, that she's worried you might be developing early-stage dementia. The manipulation was even more sophisticated than I had realized. Shannon wasn't just defending herself. She was systematically undermining my credibility with our children by suggesting I was mentally incompetent. Sarah, do I seem confused or mentally unstable to you? She studied my face carefully. No, Dad. You seem angry and hurt, but you don't seem confused. And these documents, she gestured to the papers on the table, these aren't the kind of things someone would imagine. My phone buzzed with a text from Shannon. The children are worried about you. Please come home so we can work this out as a family. I showed the text to Sarah, who shook her head in disgust. She's trying to control the narrative, Sarah said. Make it seem like you're the problem that needs to be fixed. Are you going to tell Michael what I've shown you?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What do you want to happen now? Do you want to save your marriage, or do you want to punish Mom for what she's done?" The question caught me off guard because I wasn't sure I knew the answer. The man I had been a week ago would have said saving the marriage was the priority, but that man hadn't known he was married to a stranger. "I want the truth to matter," I said finally. "I want consequences for actions. I want to stop being treated like a fool in my own life." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then yes, I'll talk to Michael. He deserves to know what's really happening." As we left the restaurant, Sarah hugged me tightly. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry Mom put you through this, and I'm sorry she tried to make us think you were losing your mind." "You believe me?" "The evidence speaks for itself. But more than that—" She pulled back to look at me. "I know you. You're the most honest person I've ever known. If you say Mom forged your signature and filed false tax returns, then that's what happened." When I got home, Shannon was waiting in the living room. She had dressed carefully, a conservative blue dress, minimal makeup, her wedding ring prominently displayed. She looked like the perfect picture of a concerned wife. "Ronald, the children are worried about you." I sat down across from her. "Are they?" "Michael thinks you might be under too much stress. Sarah wonders if you should see a doctor just to make sure everything is okay." Shannon's voice was gentle, concerned. "We all love you, and we want to make sure you're taking care of yourself." "And what do you think, Shannon?" "I think you've been working too hard for too many years, and the idea of retirement has you more anxious than you want to admit." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Sometimes when we're stressed, we can misinterpret situations or discover that our wives have been committing federal crimes." Shannon's concerned expression flickered for just a moment. "Ronald, please, listen to yourself. Do you really think I'm capable of the things you're accusing me of?" It was masterfully done. The gentle, reasonable tone, the implication that my accusations were symptoms of stress or mental instability, the positioning of herself as the worried wife trying to help her troubled husband. But I had learned to see through her performances. "Shannon, did you call the children to discuss my mental health before or after you called them to discuss the tax fraud?" She blinked. "I don't know what you mean." "I mean that Sarah knows about the forged signatures. Michael knows about the fraudulent returns, so the Concerned Wife Act isn't going to work anymore." The mask slipped. For just a moment I saw the flash of anger in Shannon's eyes before she regained control. "I don't know what you think you've told them, but—" I showed them the documentation. The bank statements, the tax returns, the business registrations, all of it. Shannon stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. When she turned back, her expression had hardened. "You had no right to involve our children in this." "I had no right?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Shannon, you called them to convince them I was mentally unstable. You tried to weaponize our own children against me." "I called them because I'm worried about you. You called them because you're trying to isolate me, make everyone think I'm the problem so they won't look too closely at what you've actually done." Shannon's composure cracked completely. "Fine. You want to know the truth? Marcus and I are building something real, something important. We need capital to make it work, and yes, I took money from our accounts to invest in our future." "Our future?" "The future Marcus and I could have together." There it was. The admission I had been waiting for. "So you are planning to leave me?" Shannon wrapped her arms around herself. "Not immediately. The plan was to build the business first, establish financial independence, then transition to a new life." "Transition?" I almost laughed. "Is that what we're calling adultery and theft now?" "It's not theft. I'm your wife. I have every legal right to access our joint accounts. To forge my signature? To file false tax returns in my name?" Shannon's eyes blazed with anger. "I did what I had to do to build something for myself. Something you never would have supported because you can't see beyond your safe, predictable little world." "And Marcus? What's his role in this master plan?" Marcus understands ambition. He understands what it takes to build real wealth instead of just accumulating a comfortable retirement fund. I studied her face, seeing clearly now the woman she had become, or maybe the woman she had always been, hidden beneath the performance of the dutiful wife. What happens to Marcus's wife in this plan? Shannon's silence was answer enough. So you and Marcus are going to destroy 2 marriages, commit federal crimes, and steal from your spouses to fund your dream business. I shook my head. And you think this makes you ambitious rather than just selfish? You wouldn't understand. You're right, I don't understand how someone can be so selfish that they're willing to destroy everyone around them for their own gratification. Shannon stared at me for a long moment. Then she walked toward the staircase. Where are you going? She paused at the bottom step. To pack a bag. I'm going to stay with Marcus until you come to your senses. Shannon. She turned back. If you leave this house to go to Marcus, don't plan on coming back. Her eyes widened. You can't keep me out of my own home. Actually, I can. This house is in my name only. I bought it before we were married, and the deed was never changed. I stood up. So if you choose Marcus over trying to work this out, you're choosing to give up any claim to the life we built together. Shannon's face went white. In all her careful planning, she had forgotten that crucial detail. You're bluffing. Am I? She stared at me, weighing her options. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the rapid assessment of risks and benefits. Finally, she turned and walked upstairs. 20 minutes later, she came back down with a suitcase. This isn't over, Ronald. Yes, it is. She opened the front door, then looked back one last time. The children will never forgive you for this. They already know the truth, Shannon, and they'll forgive me for protecting myself long before they forgive you for lying to them. After the door closed behind her, I stood alone in the living room that had been our sanctuary for 37 years. Tomorrow, I would change the locks. Tomorrow, I would meet with David Chen to discuss divorce proceedings. But tonight, I would simply sit in the silence and accept that sometimes loving someone means letting them go, especially when they've already chosen to leave. 3 days after Shannon moved out, David Chen called with news that changed everything. Ronald, you need to sit down for this. I was in my kitchen, making coffee in the strange quiet of a house that had become mine alone. Shannon had taken most of her clothes but left everything else, as if she still believed this was temporary. I'm sitting. What did you find? Marcus Webb is already married. But here's the interesting part. His wife filed for divorce 6 months ago. The grounds? Financial fraud and adultery. I set my coffee cup down carefully. Go on. It gets better. Mrs. Webb's attorney contacted me yesterday. Apparently Marcus has a pattern. This isn't his first extramarital business partnership. He's done this before, at least twice that they can prove. Done what exactly? Seduced married women, convinced them to invest their family money in fake business ventures, then disappeared when the money ran out. David's voice was grim. Ronald, your wife isn't Marcus's business partner. She's his mark. The kitchen suddenly felt very cold. Are you saying Shannon doesn't know? I'm saying Marcus Webb is a professional con artist, and Shannon walked right into his trap. The question is, what do we do with this information? I thought about Shannon's passionate defense of Marcus, her certainty that he understood her ambitions in ways I never could. Had she been manipulated this entire time, or was she a willing participant in the fraud? David, I need you to arrange a meeting. With whom? With Mrs. Webb. I think it's time Shannon learned the truth about her business partner. 2 days later, I sat across from Victoria Webb in David's office. She was an elegant woman in her mid-50s, impeccably dressed, but with the hollow look of someone who had seen her world collapse. Mr. Morrison, I want you to know how sorry I am, she said as soon as we were introduced. If I had discovered Marcus's pattern earlier, I might have been able to warn you. Tell me about the pattern. Victoria opened a file folder and spread several photographs across the conference table. Marcus targets women who feel unfulfilled in their marriages, usually women with access to joint financial accounts but without strong financial oversight from their husbands. The photographs showed Marcus with different women at restaurants, hotels, business conferences, always the same dynamic: older married women, expensive settings, intimate body language. He creates elaborate business scenarios that require startup capital, Victoria continued, investment opportunities that are too good to pass up but too complex for the women to understand completely. He makes them feel like they're finally being treated as equals, as business partners, rather than just wives. How much did he take from you? $230,000 over 18 months. I remortgaged our house, cashed out my retirement account, even borrowed against my life insurance. Victoria's voice was steady, but I could see the pain in her eyes. I believed I was investing in our future. Instead, I was funding his lifestyle with other women. Where does the money go? Expensive hotels, fine dining, travel, gifts for his targets. Marcus lives very well on other people's investments. She pulled out a bank statement. But here's what your wife doesn't know. Marcus has been withdrawing money from their joint business accounts for the past 6 months. Large amounts. I studied the statement. Withdrawals of $5,000, $8,000, $12,000. All made by Marcus Webb, all from accounts Shannon thought were building their business empire. How much is left? Based on what my attorney was able to trace, maybe $15,000. Everything else is gone. $15,000. Shannon had stolen $120,000 from our joint accounts, thinking she was building a business empire. In reality, she had funded Marcus's con game and probably his next target. Mrs. Webb, would you be willing to confront Marcus in front of Shannon? She looked at me carefully. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we give my wife the truth she deserves. Even after everything she's done, she has the right to know she's been played for a fool. Victoria nodded slowly. When and where? Leave that to me. That evening, I sent Shannon a text. We need to discuss the tax situation. Meet me at Giuseppe's tomorrow at 7. Bring Marcus. It's time to resolve this legally. Her response came quickly. Finally ready to be reasonable? We'll be there. The next evening, I arrived at Giuseppe's 30 minutes early and requested the same table where I had photographed Shannon's betrayal. David Chen sat at a nearby table, pretending to read financial documents. Victoria Webb waited in the bar area, nursing a glass of wine and watching the entrance. Shannon and Marcus arrived precisely at 7. She looked radiant, confident, like a woman who believed she was about to claim victory. Marcus was every bit as polished as I remembered. Expensive suit, perfect smile, the aura of a man accustomed to getting his way. They slid into the booth across from me, Shannon's hand briefly touching Marcus's arm in a gesture of solidarity. Ronald, Shannon said, her voice warm but cautious, I'm glad you're willing to discuss this reasonably. I'm always reasonable, I replied. Marcus, it's good to finally meet you properly. Marcus extended his hand across the table. His handshake was firm, confident. Shannon's told me a lot about you. I understand you have concerns about our business partnership. I do. But first, I'd like you to meet someone. I gestured toward the bar where Victoria Webb had risen from her seat and was walking toward our table. The moment Marcus saw her, his face went white. Hello, Marcus, Victoria said, sliding into the booth next to me. Darling. Shannon looked confused, glancing between Marcus and Victoria. I'm sorry, who are you? I'm Victoria Webb, Marcus's wife. The silence that followed was deafening. Shannon stared at Victoria, then at Marcus, then back at Victoria. Wife? Shannon's voice was barely a whisper. Soon-to-be ex-wife, Victoria clarified. We're currently in divorce proceedings, aren't we, Marcus? Marcus had found his voice again, though it lacked its usual smooth confidence. Victoria, this is inappropriate. You can't just what? Tell your business partner the truth about your business model. Victoria opened her purse and pulled out a thick folder. Shannon, dear, I think you should see these. She spread the photographs across the table. Marcus with different women in identical scenarios, Intimate dinners, hotel lobbies, business conferences. The same setup Shannon thought was unique to their relationship. "What is this?" Shannon's voice was rising. "This is your business partner's track record," I said gently. "Marcus has been running this same con for years. You're not his first victim, and you won't be his last." Shannon grabbed one of the photographs, studying it closely. "Marcus, what is this? Who are these women?" Marcus was sweating now, his composure completely shattered. "Shannon, I can explain. These are taken out of context." "Context?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "The context is that you seduced these women, convinced them to invest their family money in fake business ventures, then disappeared when their accounts were empty." She turned to Shannon. "How much money did you give him access to?" Shannon was staring at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. "Marcus, tell me this isn't true." "Shannon, you have to understand. How much money is left in our business accounts?" Her voice was sharp now, demanding. Marcus looked around the restaurant, as if seeking an escape route. "The business required more startup capital than we initially projected. How much is left?" "Maybe 20,000. 20,000? Shannon's voice cracked. "I put $120,000 into those accounts." "Shannon, please let me explain the investment strategy." "Stop lying." She turned to Victoria. "How much did he steal from you?" $230,000. Shannon's face went ashen. She looked at the photographs again, then at Marcus, then at me. "Ronald, did you know about this?" "I found out 3 days ago. I thought you deserved to know the truth." Shannon's breathing was shallow, rapid. "Marcus, please tell me. This is some kind of misunderstanding." Marcus reached for her hand, but she jerked away. "Shannon, what we have is real. Yes, I've made mistakes in the past, but what we're building together is fake," Victoria finished. "Just like it was fake with me. Just like it was fake with Jennifer in Denver and Carol in Phoenix." She pointed to the photographs. "He uses the same lines, Shannon. The same promises about understanding your potential and building something important together." Shannon was staring at Marcus with growing horror. "The hotels, the weekend trips, did you pay for those with my money?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. "All of it?" Shannon's voice was barely audible. "Everything we built together was funded by money I stole from my husband?" "You didn't steal anything," Marcus said desperately. "You invested in our future." "Our future that doesn't exist." Shannon stood up so abruptly that her chair nearly tipped over. "You made me destroy my marriage for a lie." "Shannon, please. I forged my husband's signature. I filed false tax returns. I turned my own children against me." Her voice was rising, attracting stares from other diners. "I did all of that because I believed we were building something real." Marcus tried to stand, but Victoria blocked his path. "Sit down, Marcus. You owe her an explanation." "I don't owe anyone anything," he snapped, his mask finally slipping completely. Shannon knew what she was doing. Nobody forced her to take that money. The cold calculation in his voice was shocking. This was the real Marcus Webb. Not the charming businessman who understood Shannon's ambitions, but a predator who had manipulated her into destroying her own life. Shannon sank back into her seat, staring at him with disbelief. "You never loved me." "Love?" Marcus laughed harshly. "Shannon, you're a middle-aged housewife with access to her husband's bank account. Did you really think this was about love?" The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I watched my wife of 37 years realize that everything she had sacrificed our marriage for had been an elaborate lie. "How many others are there?" Shannon asked Victoria. "That we can prove?" 5. But Marcus has been doing this for over a decade, so there are probably more. Shannon looked at the photographs again, studying the faces of the other women. "Do they all look like me?" Victoria nodded sadly. "Middle-aged, married, financially secure, but emotionally vulnerable. Marcus has a very specific type." Shannon turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Ronald, I'm so sorry. I destroyed everything for someone who was just using me." I looked at her across the table, this woman who had been my wife for 37 years. 3 weeks ago, I would have done anything to save our marriage. Now, seeing her broken and humiliated, I felt only pity. Shannon, I tried to warn you. You chose not to listen. I know. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. I know, and I can't take any of it back. Marcus had been sitting silently, probably calculating his next move. Now he stood up, straightening his tie. This has been illuminating, but I have other appointments tonight. Victoria grabbed his arm. You're not going anywhere until we discuss returning the money you stole. Marcus shook her off. I didn't steal anything. Shannon made voluntary investments in legitimate business ventures. If those ventures didn't perform as expected, that's the risk of business. The sheer audacity of it was stunning. Even caught red-handed, Marcus was maintaining the pretense that his cons were legitimate business activities. Voluntary investments. Shannon's voice was dangerous now. You manipulated me into destroying my marriage. I offered you opportunities. You chose to take them. Marcus's smile was cold, reptilian. And frankly, Shannon, you were eager enough to betray your husband when you thought it would benefit you. Don't blame me for your own moral flexibility. The words hung in the air like acid. Shannon flinched as if she had been slapped. You're right, she said quietly. I was eager to betray him, because you made me believe I deserved more than the life I had. You do deserve more. You just went about getting it the wrong way. Shannon looked at Marcus with something approaching hatred. No, I went about getting it with the wrong person. She stood up and walked toward the restaurant exit. I followed her outside, leaving Victoria to deal with Marcus. In the parking lot, Shannon leaned against my car, sobbing. Ronald, I've destroyed everything, our marriage, our finances, my relationship with the children, all for a man who was just using me. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't. Too much had happened, too much trust had been broken. Shannon, what are you going to do now? She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I don't know. I have nowhere to go, no money, no one who trusts me. She laughed bitterly. I guess this is what I get for thinking I was smarter than everyone else. You can come home tonight, I said. We need to discuss practical matters anyway. The tax situation, the legal implications, how to handle the divorce. Divorce? The word seemed to surprise her. Did you think we could come back from this? Shannon was quiet for a long moment. I hoped maybe, if I could fix the financial problems, return the money somehow. Shannon, you didn't just take money. You forged my signature on federal documents. You committed crimes that could send both of us to prison. I looked at her directly. There's no coming back from that. She nodded, accepting the finality of it. I understand. As we drove home in separate cars, I thought about the woman I had married 37 years ago and the stranger she had become. Marcus Webb had manipulated her, but he hadn't created her capacity for betrayal. He had simply exploited it. Tomorrow, Shannon and I would begin the process of untangling a life we had built together and destroyed separately. But tonight, for one last time, we would sleep under the same roof as the ruins of our marriage settled around us. 6 months after that devastating dinner at Giuseppe's, I sat in my lawyer's office signing the final divorce papers. Shannon sat across from me, looking like a shadow of the woman who had once commanded every room she entered. The proceedings had been surprisingly straightforward. When the IRS completed their investigation, they determined that Shannon had acted alone in the tax fraud scheme. The forged signatures were clearly different from my actual signature, and my cooperation in providing evidence had protected me from prosecution. Shannon wasn't so fortunate. She pleaded guilty to tax fraud and received 2 years of probation, community service, and a hefty fine that consumed what little money Marcus hadn't stolen. The house remained mine, along with most of our joint assets since Shannon's criminal activity had voided her claims to marital property. Is there anything else we need to discuss? David Chen asked as we finished the paperwork. I looked at Shannon one last time. She had aged years in the past 6 months. Her hair was graying, her clothes were discount store rather than designer, and she carried herself like someone who had learned the hard way that actions have consequences. "Shannon, where are you living now?" "I have a studio apartment downtown, near the bus line." Her voice was quiet, defeated. "I got a job at Henderson's department store, in the alterations department." Henderson's was where she had worked as a teenager before we met. The fact that she was back there at 57 spoke volumes about how completely her empire of lies had collapsed. "Are you okay?" She looked up at me with something that might have been gratitude. "I'm surviving. The children visit sometimes, though I know they're still processing everything." She paused. "Ronald, I need you to know something." I waited. When I found out about Marcus, about how he used me, I understood what I had done to you. I finally understood how it feels to be betrayed by someone you trust completely. Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. After Shannon left, David and I sat in his office discussing practical matters. The tax penalties had been paid, the legal issues resolved, the assets divided. "So what now?" he asked. "Now I figure out how to be Ronald Morrison again instead of half of a couple that never really existed." "Any plans?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Actually, yes." 3 weeks later, I was standing on the deck of a cruise ship in the Mediterranean, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The cruise was something Shannon and I had talked about for years, but never taken. She had always found reasons to postpone. Too expensive, too long away from home, too many other priorities. Now I understood the real reason. Shannon had never wanted to spend 2 weeks alone with me, away from distractions and other people. She had known, probably long before I did, that we didn't have enough real connection to sustain that kind of intimacy. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" I turned to see a woman about my age standing at the rail nearby. She had silver hair, kind eyes, and the confident posture of someone comfortable in her own skin. "It is," I agreed. "I'm Ronald." "Margaret, but my friends call me Maggie." She smiled. "Are you traveling alone?" "I am. Recently divorced. Thought it was time to do some things I'd been putting off." "Good for you. I'm a widow myself. Lost my husband 2 years ago, and decided I wasn't going to wait around for life to happen to me." We talked for an hour as the ship sailed through the calm Mediterranean waters. Maggie was a retired teacher from Boston, traveling with a group of friends but happy to meet new people. She was intelligent, funny, and refreshingly direct. "Can I ask you something?" she said as we prepared to go in for dinner. "Of course." "You seem like a nice man, but you also seem like someone who's been hurt recently. Are you sure you're ready to be making new friends?" The question was perceptive and kind. I think making new friends is exactly what I need to be doing. It's making old mistakes I want to avoid. "Fair enough. Would you like to have dinner with me and my friends tomorrow night? We'd love the company of someone who can discuss something other than grandchildren and medications." I laughed, realizing I hadn't felt this relaxed in years. "I'd like that very much." Over the next week, I spent most of my time with Maggie and her group. They were retired professionals who had decided to embrace adventure rather than settle into comfortable decline. We toured ancient ruins in Greece, sampled wines in Italian villages, and shared stories about the lives we had lived and the dreams we still harbored. "You know what I like about you, Ronald?" Maggie said one evening as we sat on her balcony sharing a bottle of wine. "What's that?" "You don't seem to need anything from me. Most men our age are looking for someone to take care of them or someone to impress. You just seem to enjoy my company for what it is." "I'm learning the difference between needing someone and choosing to be with someone," I said. "Needing led to a lot of compromises that weren't healthy for either of us." "Your ex-wife?" I had told Maggie the basic outline of my story, though not the painful details. "She needed me to be someone I wasn't, and I needed her to be someone she wasn't. When we both stopped pretending, there was nothing left." "Do you miss her?" I considered the question carefully. I miss the life I thought we had, but I don't miss the constant feeling that I was failing to live up to expectations I never understood. And now I feel like myself for the first time in decades. When the cruise ended, Maggie and I exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch. She was flying back to Boston. I was returning to my new life in a house that was finally just mine. But 3 weeks later, Maggie called. "Ronald, I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. My book club is reading a financial planning guide, and we're all completely confused. We need someone who actually understands money to explain it to us. Would you consider flying to Boston for a weekend to be our guest speaker?" I smiled, looking around my kitchen where I had been eating dinner alone for the past month. "Maggie, I thought you'd never ask." The weekend in Boston led to another invitation, then another. Within 2 months, I was making regular trips to visit Maggie and her friends. Sometimes she would visit me, and I would show her around the city I had called home for 37 years. "You know what's strange?" I told her one evening as we walked through the park near my house. "What?" "I spent decades trying to make Shannon happy and never succeeded. With you, I'm not trying to make anyone happy, and I feel happier than I've been in years." "That's not strange," Maggie said. "That's healthy. Happiness isn't something you can create for someone else. It's something you choose for yourself." As autumn turned to winter, Maggie and I settled into a comfortable rhythm. She would visit for a week, I would visit Boston for a week, and we would both maintain our independence while choosing to share parts of our lives. "Are we dating?" she asked one evening as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen. "I don't know," I admitted. "Are we?" "I think we're doing something better than dating. I think we're becoming friends who happen to enjoy each other's company in all sorts of ways." "Is that enough for you?" "Ronald, at our age, enjoying someone's company without drama or complications isn't just enough. It's a gift." 6 months after meeting Maggie, I received an unexpected phone call from Michael. "Dad, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not believing you immediately when you told me about Mom, for thinking you might be having some kind of breakdown instead of recognizing that you were protecting yourself from someone who was hurting you." "Michael, you were trying to be loyal to both of your parents. I understand that. But I should have trusted you. You've never lied to Sarah or me about anything important. I should have known you wouldn't start with something this serious." "How is your mother?" "She's different. Humbled, I think. Working at that department store has been hard on her, but maybe it's what she needed. She talks about you sometimes." "What does she say?" "That she understands now why you couldn't forgive her. That she's glad you found someone who treats you the way you deserve to be treated." I was surprised. "She knows about Maggie?" "Sarah told her. Mom said to tell you she's happy that you're happy. She says it proves you're a better person than she thought you were." After I hung up, I sat on my deck watching the sunset and thinking about the path that had led me to this moment. A year ago, I had been a man who defined himself through his marriage to someone who didn't really want to be married to him. Now I was simply Ronald Morrison, retired accountant, occasional cruise traveler, friend to a wonderful woman who chose to spend time with me because she enjoyed my company. The phone rang again. Maggie's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, beautiful," I answered. "Hi, yourself. I have news." "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. My lease is up in December, and I've been thinking about trying life in a different city. Know anywhere that might have room for a retired teacher who makes excellent coffee and only occasionally tries to reorganize other people's lives?" I smiled, looking around the house that had been a symbol of everything I had lost and was becoming a symbol of everything I had gained. "I know just the place." As I hung up the phone, I thought about Shannon and the empire of lies she had built on the foundation of our marriage. She had wanted more than the life we shared, and in pursuing that dream, she had lost everything. But in losing Shannon, I had found something I hadn't even known I was missing, the ability to be completely myself with someone who valued that person exactly as he was. The irony wasn't lost on me. Shannon had destroyed our marriage while searching for someone who would see her potential. In the end, she had given me the gift of finding someone who saw mine. I had spent 37 years being half of a couple that never really existed. Now, at 62, I was learning to be whole on my own and discovering that wholeness was the foundation for any relationship worth having. Tomorrow, I would call Maggie back and tell her that, yes, I knew exactly the right place for a woman who made excellent coffee and only occasionally tried to reorganize other people's lives, and then I would start preparing for the next chapter of a life that was finally, completely, my own. The hidden empire Shannon had built was gone, destroyed by the lies that had created it. But from its ruins I had built something better, a life based on truth, choice, and the simple pleasure of being genuinely known and appreciated. For the first time in decades, I was exactly where I belonged.